Okay, this is a video lesson for the volume and the surface area of a sphere formula. In this video lesson, I'm going to give you the two formulas. The volume formula for a sphere is 4/3 pi r cubed. And the surface area for a sphere is 4 pi r squared. And those appear on your formula sheets. The volume derivation is actually very accessible. You can go to this link, which I'm actually going to send you, and you can watch the little 4-minute video of how they come up with the volume formula. It's kind of interesting. The surface area is a little bit more challenging, so I'll leave that to just be given to you. Recall what a sphere is. A sphere is just a ball, okay? So a sphere basically has a radius, and that's really all it has, because every point that's on the sphere is the same distance away from the center of the sphere. So it's like a 3D circle, basically. Whereas a circle, every point in the plane is the same distance away from the center. In a sphere, that extends out to 3 dimensions. Okay, so let's do a few of these problems. So one is very easy. I'd like to find the surface area of a sphere that has a radius of 7. My surface area formula is 4 pi r squared. Again, area is squared units. That's how you can distinguish this from the volume. So my surface area would be 4 pi times the 7 squared. 7 squared is 49. 49 times 4 is 196. So I get 196 pi. But they asked me to round my answer to the nearest tenth. So I'll get out my trusty calculator here. Okay, so we're clearing that. So I have 4 pi times 7 squared, and that is equal to 615.75. And if I'm rounding that to the nearest tenth, that would be 615.8. And my units would be centimeters squared. This is the outside surface area, like if you were painting the sphere. Okay, so number 2 says I want to find the volume of a sphere that has a diameter of 12 inches in terms of pi. So my volume formula is 4/3 pi r cubed. So I have 4/3 times pi. My diameter is 12, which makes the radius equal to 6. Again, I really think you guys could do all these particular problems on your own. They're just plugging in, but I just want to make sure that we're modeling carefully enough for you. So 4/3 pi, 6 cubed is 216. So now my objective is to do 4/3 times 216, and I can do that right in the calculator. Okay, you can do it a few ways. One way you can say is, all right, well, 4/3 is really multiply by 4 and divide by 3. So I can do 216 times 4, enter, and divide that answer by 3, and I'll get 288. Another way to do it is to create a fraction in your calculator. So if you press alpha, which is the green key, y equals, and enter, you get a fraction in the calculator. Whoops, I don't know what's happening there. Okay, sorry about that. Let me just do that one more time. Alpha, y equals, enter, and you get a fraction. You can do 4/3. And just to get out of the bottom of the fraction, just press the right arrow times 216, and you get 288 that way. So I want to leave this answer in terms of pi. So this would be 288 pi. And if I didn't ask for units, but I probably should have. The units would be inches cubed because we're dealing with volume. Because remember, my 6 inches here for my radius was cubed, and that's where the inches cubed comes from. Okay, a few more. So now we're interested in this question. A sphere has a surface area of 144 pi centimeters squared, and I'd like to find the diameter. So obviously I'm going to write my surface area formula out, my 4 pi r squared, and my surface area is 144 pi. Oops, sorry, 144 pi, and that equals 4 pi r squared. And hopefully you see that this is an equation with the radius as the only variable. So I can solve for the radius by dividing by 4 pi. The 4's and the pi's divide out to 1. So I get r squared equals, here the pi's divide out to 1, and 144 divided by 4, I can do on my calculator, or you can do it in your head. 144 divided by 4, I get 36. So now I get 36 as r squared. I can then take the square root. I get r equals 6. That's my radius. They wanted the diameter. So I can say the diameter would be 12 centimeters. Notice the diameter is a length, so my units are not square. My units are just normal centimeters. Okay. So similarly, a sphere has a surface area of 520 centimeters squared. Find the length of the radius. Round your answer to the nearest tenth of a centimeter. A lot of you struggle with a similar question about cylinders on the quiz, so you may want to lock in here in terms of what we're doing. So a sphere has a surface area of 520 centimeters squared. So the formula for the surface area of a sphere is 4 pi r squared. Notice my surface area is just 520. There's no pi. So just thinking ahead a little bit, when I divide by pi, it's not going to cancel. We're going to have an ugly decimal, and that's where the calculator really becomes helpful here. So I'm going to divide by 4 pi. So now I have r squared equals, and I have to get this monstrosity of a decimal in my calculator. So I'm going to use my fraction key, alpha y equals enter, and I'm going to do 520 over 4 pi. And I'm going to get 41.3802852. Caution, if you do 520 divided by 4 pi like this, you're going to get the wrong answer. Why? Because this 4 pi needs to be grouped. That's what the fraction automatically does. That's why I like the fraction. It automatically groups the numerator and the numerator together and the denominator together. So the correct answer here is the 41.3802852. And then I can take the square root of that right now, and I'll get r equals. So I can just go back and take the square root of, I can just come up here and grab the 41.3 or so, and I get 6.432750982, and so that's 6.4327, etc. And I'm asking to round that to the nearest tenth. So this would be 6.4 centimeters. Okay? All right, a few more. I'm actually going to leave number 5 to you. Surface area of a sphere is 900 pi feet squared. I want you to find the volume. You guys should be able to do that with the skills that you learned in this lesson. And actually, I would like to skip to number 6. So number 6 says a sphere has a volume of 288 pi yards cubed. Find the surface area of the sphere. So my volume is, for a sphere, is 4/3 pi r cubed. And ultimately, I would like to find the surface area of the sphere, which is 4 pi r squared. So notice how I organized. I wrote down my formulas. I left space underneath to do the work. So now I know my volume is 288 pi. And that's equal to 4/3 pi r cubed. So if I look at this equation, my only variable is r. So I now have to solve for r. Well, this fraction is very obnoxious, the 4/3. So what I can do is multiply both sides by the reciprocal of that fraction, which is 3/4. Because let's think about this for a second. If I just come up to the side here, I'm just going to do a little work on the side here. If I have 4/3 times 3/4, if I were just doing this, the way you usually multiply fractions across the page, 4 times 3 is 12, and 3 times 4 is 12, and 12/12 is 1. In other words, if I looked at it like this, I have 4 times 3/3 times 4. Well, what ends up happening is that the 4's divide out and the 3's divide out, and I get 1. In other words, the 4's cancel and the 3's cancel, and I get a 1. So if I multiply by the reciprocal of 4/3 on both sides of the equation, I will rid myself of that fraction And that's a very nice thing to do. I just have to remember to do it on the other side of the equation. So now on the right-hand side, I'll have pi r cubed. And on the left-hand side, I'll have 3/4 times 288, which I can do in the calculator. I can go alpha y equals enter. I can do 3/4 times 288. Okay, and that equals 216. So I have 216 pi equals pi r cubed. And then I can divide out by pi, because ultimately I want to solve for r. So then I get r cubed equals 216. Now we've dealt with an equation like this before. It's similar to a squared equation, where if this was r squared, I would just take the square root on both sides. But this is not r squared, it's r cubed. And in this case, we would take the cube root on both sides. And we can do that in our calculator as well. If you press math and you go down to option 4, you'll get the cube root, and this undoes cubes. Just as square roots undo squares. So cube root of 216, and some of you may have guessed this is actually 6. Now just to check that, if I take 6 and multiply it by itself, not 2 times, but 3 times, I get back to 216. So that's the correct radius. And then I can use that radius to go get the surface area. So I can take the radius of 6 and go get the surface area now. So now my surface area is 4 pi times 6 squared. The surface area is 4 pi times 36. 36 times 4 is 144. They asked me to the nearest tenth, so I can plug that into the calculator. I can take 144 pi, and plug that into the calculator, and I will get 452.3893421. Rounding that to the nearest tenth, okay, rounding that to the nearest tenth, I would get 452.4 and in this case, did they give us units for the volume? Yes. So yards cubed was my volume. So yards squared would be my final surface area. Okay. So basically, that's it for our video lesson. Your assignment now is to finish these questions. And tomorrow and Friday, we are going to do more problem solving with all of the different volume formulas and do some real life problem solving. All right. Thanks, guys.